Kellyanne Conway leaned forward, a smirk cutting across her face like a blade. With a stack of neatly prepared facts in her hand, she began firing them one after another, not as clarifications, not as data points, but as weapons meant to box her opponent in. Each line carried the same edge, the same practiced rhythm of a political veteran who had built a career on spinning words into traps. But across from her, Jasmine Crockett didn't flinch. She didn't shuffle through. Papers didn't glance nervously toward the crowd, didn't give Kellyanne the satisfaction of even a raised eyebrow. She simply sat, calm, steady. Her eyes locked forward with the poise of someone who had weathered far worse storms than this. The room stiffened. Viewers leaned closer to their screens. This was the moment Kellyanne thrived on, when her opponent hesitated when doubt slipped into their expression. When the so-called facts seemed too overwhelming to counter. For a flicker of a second, Kellyanne believed she had already won. But then silence. The pause stretched long, enough for tension to creep in. Crockett's expression didn't change. She let Kellyanne's words hang in the air, weightless and hollow, till the smirk on Conway's face began to falter, and that's when the narrator's voice cut in, sharp and electrifying. When Kellyanne thought she had the upper hand, the response that followed flipped the entire stage in an instant. Because this clash wasn't just about policy details or partisan talking points, or who could speak louder into a microphone. It was about something far greater, who could command the truth in America's debate. Was it the polished arrogance of a media-seasoned operator, or the grounded resilience of a woman who had fought for every inch of respect she carried into the room? No. The tension mounted, the audience shifting in their seats, sensing that something irreversible was about to unfold. Kellyanne's smirk remained, but it no longer looked like control. It looked like denial. And then came the moment. Crockett leaned forward ever so slightly, ready to speak, her calm radiating louder than Kellyanne's barrage ever could. And, with one exchange, the room realized this wasn't Conway's stage anymore. The stage wasn't just lit with studio lights, it was burning with expectation. This was no ordinary debate. It was prime time, high profile, the kind of event that turned into headlines before the closing statements were even made. And if anyone in the room had the upper hand on paper, it was Kellyanne Conway. For years, Conway had built her brand on sharp comebacks and media dominance. She could twist questions into riddles, spin criticism into applause, and turn interviews into showcases of her control. In the theater of politics, she had mastered the performance. People didn't just expect her to win, they assumed she would. That assumption was the air she breathed, and tonight, it was thick around her. But Jasmine Crockett didn't walk into the room with assumptions. She walked in carrying the weight of being underestimated. From the moment she sat down, she was dismissed in whispers, framed as the underdog, someone who would be lucky just to keep up. Conway's smirk wasn't just about confidence, it was about contempt, it said. You don't belong on this stage with me, and yet Crockett sat steady. That's what made this showdown so electric, because what was on the line wasn't just the exchange of ideas or the parsing of policies. This was about reputation. It was about authority. It was about cultural respect, who deserved it, who demanded it, and who would seize it. The audience could feel the stakes rising. This wasn't just politics. It was about who really gets to define the truth in front of America. For Conway, this debate was supposed to be another notch in her belt, another moment where her quick tongue left an opponent stumbling. For Crockett, this was about far more than winning an argument. It was about proving that truth doesn't bow to arrogance, that dignity can command the stage without theatrics, that the underestimated voice could shatter the loudest one. Every word Conway threw was meant to dominate. Every silence Crockett held was meant to endure. And together, that tension grew into something larger, a battle not just between two women, but between two versions of America, one that prizes celebrity spin and one that prizes lived truth. The crowd felt it. The viewers at home felt it. And whether Conway realized it or not, she was playing into the very role she thought gave her strength. The aggressor, underestimating the calm, because arrogance always assumes it's in control, till it isn't. The spark was lit, and Conway had no idea how fast it would spread. Kellyanne Conway didn't just arrive on this stage as another debater. She arrived as a symbol, a persona crafted over years of combat in the harshest arenas of American politics. To many, she was the fast-talking strategist, the spin master, the queen of the talking point. She had made a career out of controlling narratives, bending reality with a smile that seemed to say, "I dare you to keep up." For years, journalists had watched her dance circles around questions. She could reframe, deflect, and spin with an ease that felt almost supernatural. Ask her about one controversy, and she would redirect to another. Push her on facts, and she would rebrand them as alternative. To her supporters, she was brilliant, untouchable. To her critics, she was manipulative, even dangerous. But either way, Kellyanne Conway commanded attention. She knew how to own a moment, and she thrived on it. History is full of figures like her, the political operatives, who mistake quick wit for unshakable power. Spin doctors who believed their ability to twist words was the same as controlling truth. They underestimated grassroots fighters, the voices that didn't come from media empires or elite circles, but from lived struggle. Again and again, history reminded us the strategist may dominate the airwaves, but the everywoman, the one with authenticity and grit, could shift the ground under their feet. And tonight, Jasmine Crockett was that reminder. But Kellyanne didn't see it coming. To her, Crockett was just another opponent to steamroll. She slipped into her role with ease, sarcasm dripping from her tone, interruptions peppering the flow, those trademark smug smiles flashing like daggers. Every gesture was designed to destabilize, to show dominance, to remind the audience that she had been here before. She leaned forward, voice sharpened with irony, tossing lines that weren't about dialogue but about dismissal. The rhythm was familiar. Conway asked rapid-fire questions she never intended to let her opponent finish. She laughed before Crockett completed a thought, shaking her head in performative disbelief. She wielded her trademark smirk like a weapon, signaling to the crowd that she, not Crockett, was the authority. For Kellyanne, it was muscle memory. These tactics had worked for years. They rattled rookies. They flustered journalists, kept her name trending, and her opponents fumbling. Why would tonight be any different? But here's the irony the narrator can't resist. Kellyanne Conway thrived on making others stumble, yet tonight, the misstep would be her own. Because what she didn't recognize was that Crockett wasn't playing the same game. Wasn't there to spar with sarcasm or volley insults. She was there with something stronger, something that didn't need volume or interruptions to cut through. Truth, grounded in lived experience. The clash of styles was almost theatrical. Conway's constant needling became background noise, while Crockett's calm presence drew the audience's focus tighter with each passing minute. Conway's smirks, once symbols of control, began to read as desperation, the grin of someone performing dominance rather than holding it. But arrogance has a way of blinding even the sharpest strategist. Kellyanne believed the old playbook still worked. She believed that fast talk and smug confidence would drown out composure and authenticity. She believed the audience would laugh with her, not at her. She was wrong, because arrogance blinds, and Conway never saw the storm coming. Before the lights, before the cameras, before the nation began chanting her name across timelines and hashtags, Jasmine Crockett was just a kid from Texas. Her story didn't begin with privilege or polished media coaching. It began with grit. It began in neighborhoods, where working-class families stretched paychecks and carried each other through hard times. Crockett's education wasn't defined by elite institutions with gleaming halls. It was defined by resilience, by the lessons life handed her, often with no warning and no safety net. She was the daughter of strivers, raised in a place where dignity wasn't handed out freely. It was earned by surviving, by fighting, by refusing to bend when the world tried to push you down. Those roots gave her an armor no studio lights could ever replicate. She knew what it was to be dismissed, underestimated, told she wasn't enough, and every one of those moments became fuel. When Crockett pursued law, it wasn't because she wanted prestige. It was because she saw injustice firsthand. and couldn't stay silent. She watched systems that punished the poor, that preyed on the vulnerable, that spoke about law and order, but silenced those who had no power. The courtroom became her battleground. She wasn't fighting for headlines. She was fighting for people who didn't have a microphone, and every time she stood up for someone who was told to sit down, she carved herself into something stronger, a fighter forged by injustice. Contrast that with Kellyanne Conway, a woman polished in privilege. Conway's career was built on campaigns, on television hits, on the spotlight that was always within reach. She had media training, networks of power, and a lifetime of shaping narratives for those already in control. Her fight was the fight of boardrooms and press briefings, a theater of influence where words were sharpened into weapons. But consequences rarely touched her directly. Crockett's climb was different. Her spotlight wasn't given. It was wrestled from hands that told her she'd never reach it. While Conway perfected the art of the smirk under studio lights, Crockett perfected the art of keeping composure in rooms where her very presence was questioned. While Conway was rewarded for spinning truths, Crockett had to prove herself with truth alone. And yet here they sat on the same stage, one carrying privilege polished into performance, the other carrying scars turned into strength. Crockett's rise into Congress wasn't scripted by strategists or carved by media machinery. It was born of late nights studying, long days fighting cases, and years of speaking for people others overlooked. Her education wasn't just in books. In watching injustice unfold on the ground and deciding she would not let it stand, every courtroom, every protest, every vote of confidence from the people back home built a foundation that could not be shaken by smirks or sarcasm, and perhaps that was what Conway never understood. Because to Conway, this debate was about dominance, about who could talk louder, faster, with more flair. But to Crockett, this was about truth. It's about who really gets to define what America listens to. She didn't need to shout. She had lived too much to waste her breath on theatrics. That resilience, that lived education, became her weapon. It wasn't loud, but it was undeniable. She had been underestimated before, dismissed before, laughed at before. And every single time she had turned those moments into victories now. Under the hot stage lights, with Conway firing off her signature spin and smug laughter, Crockett sat unbothered. Her eyes didn't flinch. Her body didn't break into nervous gestures. She simply held her ground. Because unlike Conway, Crockett wasn't performing for power, she was standing in it. And this was the foreshadowing no one could miss. All. Those years of being silenced had given her the most powerful skill of all, the ability to silence arrogance not with noise, but with undeniable truth. That resilience built her truth, and that truth was about to silence Conway. Because when Crockett finally spoke, the stage flipped. The moment the floor opened, Conway pounced. She leaned forward, eyes flashing, her words like machine gun fire. Congresswoman Crockett, maybe if you actually read the numbers, maybe if you understood the facts, you'd realize how misguided your position really is. She smirked. As the crowd stirred, feeding off the rhythm of her rapid-fire talking points, each line was less about truth and more about dominance. A performance meant to rattle, not inform. She interrupted before Crockett could finish a sentence, waving her hand dismissively. No, let me finish, because clearly you don't know the context. Her voice climbed higher, sharp with mockery, trying to paint Crockett as out of her depth. To Conway, this was the moment she thrived on, the spectacle, the takedown, the roar of control. But Crockett didn't flinch. She didn't fumble for papers, didn't rush to speak over the noise. Instead, she sat steady, eyes locked, letting Conway's storm whip around her. Every interruption, every mocking laugh only deepened the contrast. Conway's energy grew frantic. Crockett's stillness became its own kind of weapon. The audience began to sense it. Murmur rippled through the crowd, not quite applause. Not yet protest, but a shifting unease. The moderators exchanged nervous glances. They'd seen debates turn ugly before, but this was different. It wasn't policy sparring anymore. It was a test of credibility, of dignity itself. Finally, when Conway took a breath, Crockett leaned in ever so slightly. Her voice, calm and measured, cut through the air like steel. "You've had your turn," she said, not raising her volume, but commanding the room all the same. The murmurs quieted. The interruption stopped. For the first time that night, Conway's rhythm faltered. Then Crockett began, not with a shout, but with a truth layered so carefully it landed harder than any insult. She cited the very facts Conway had twisted, but reframed them with clarity, with context, with a steadiness that made the spin dissolve. Each point built on the last, and with every sentence, the smug smile on Conway's face weakened. The tension grew thick. The audience leaned forward. Even the moderators froze, sensing something was happening that went beyond debate rules or talking points. And then came the moment. Crockett paused. She didn't rush. Yet she let silence fill the stage. Let Conway's eyes flicker with impatience. And then, with perfect precision, she delivered the line that would hang in the air long after the camera stopped rolling. It was sharp, it was undeniable, and it sliced through Conway's carefully crafted facade in an instant. And then silence. Conway had no comeback. For a moment, the entire room seemed suspended in silence. The lights above hummed faintly. The audience leaned forward in their seats. And Conway's smirk lingered forced, brittle, straining to mask the sudden shift in energy. She had dominated debates for years with speed and swagger, but in this instant, she was no longer in control. Crockett didn't rush. She didn't need to. She let the pause expand, the kind of silence that speaks louder than any insult. And then, with a steady tone that carried more weight than Conway's shouting ever could, she began. "Facts aren't weapons," she said, her voice clear and calm. "They're responsibilities. And responsibility means telling the whole truth." It wasn't loud, it wasn't flashy, but it landed with devastating precision. The crowd exhaled in unison, as though they'd been holding their breath. Even the moderators straightened in their seats. Recognizing that something had shifted, Conway blinked rapidly, caught off guard. Her instinct was to jump back in, to regain momentum. She lifted her hand, lips parting, but Crockett kept speaking. Unshaken. "You wield numbers like daggers," Crockett continued, "but you cut away the context. You slice off the people those numbers represent. You reduce lives into sound bites that fit your spin. But when you take away the whole truth, you're not informing the American people. You're misleading them." Gasps echoed faintly through the audience. Some nodded, some whispered. Conway shifted in her chair, the smirk now replaced with an uncertain tightness at the corners of her mouth. She tried to interject. Well, actually, but the words faltered. Her timing was gone. The rhythm she thrived on had slipped from her grip. Crockett seized the moment, her voice unwavering. "I wasn't raised to mistake noise for strength. I wasn't taught to confuse volume with wisdom. I was taught that truth doesn't need to shout, it just needs to stand." The underdog was no longer the underdog. The stage belonged to her now. Each sentence built momentum, the calm conviction wrapping around the audience like a current pulling them in. Even Conway's supporters shifted uncomfortably, realizing the performance they expected had turned into something else entirely. Crockett leaned slightly forward, her eyes never leaving Conway's. "You think facts are yours to weaponize? No. Facts belong to the people. They belong to the families who live them, the workers who struggle under them, the communities who are shaped by them. Right. To treat them like props in a show," she paused just long enough to let the silence sting. "That's not strength. That's arrogance." The murmurs grew louder now, transforming into applause that rippled across the hall. Conway pressed her lips together, trying once more to cut in, but the authority she once commanded had evaporated. She looked not like the master strategist, but like someone watching the stage slip away beneath her feet. Crockett didn't gloat. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. Her strength was in composure, in refusing to play Conway's game of noise and interruption, and the audience knew it. They leaned in not to catch an insult, but to witness dignity reshaping the very air in the room. "You wanted to question my credibility?" Crockett said, her voice steady as stone. "Here it is. I don't need to distort the truth to defend my values. I don't need to cut corners to win an argument. My education wasn't about learning how to spin it, it was about learning how to serve. A thunder of applause erupted now, rising, echoing. The moderators struggled to quiet the room, but it was futile. The energy had shifted completely, transformed into awe. Conway sat back in her chair, her smile gone, her eyes darting briefly to the crowd as if searching for escape, and Crockett wasn't finished. Because power, Ms. Conway, isn't measured by how loudly you can shout down someone else. It's measured by how firmly you can stand in truth when someone tries. The applause turned into a standing ovation. Even the hosts exchanged glances, half disbelief, half admiration. This wasn't just a rebuttal, it was a dismantling, piece by piece, of Conway's persona. Conway opened her mouth one last time, but no words came. The silence after Crockett's final line was deafening, more brutal than any insult. The stage had flipped. The audience knew it. America watching at home knew it. And the narrator's voice cut in, underscoring the weight of the moment. And that wasn't just a win in the room, it was validation heard across America. Asterisk, the debate ended, but the story had only just begun. Within minutes, clips of Crockett's calm dismantling of Kellyanne Conway began flooding every corner of social media. On Twitter, hashtags exploded into life. Hashtag Conway cornered. Hashtag Crockett flip. Hashtag facts with dignity. What had started as a single exchange on stage became a digital wildfire, consuming timelines and news feeds alike. The memes came quickly, Conway's once confident smirk frozen beside Crockett's steady, unflinching gaze. Split-screen images captioned how it started versus how it ended. GIFs replayed Conway's aborted interruption, her mouth half open as Crockett's words rolled over her. TikTok edits layered Crockett's line, "Facts aren't weapons." Their responsibilities over cinematic music, transforming it into a viral anthem. Commentators moved just as fast. A well-known political analyst tweeted, "This wasn't just a clapback. This was the clapback of the year." A late-night host joked, "Kellyanne brought a dagger made of spin, and Crockett brought a sword forged in truth." But beyond the punchlines was a recognition that something real had shifted. Cultural influencers who usually avoided politics chimed in. A fashion blogger wrote, "I don't know much about debates, but Crockett's composure? That's power. That's elegance." A popular sports figure posted, "Crockett just showed the whole country that calm beats chaos every time." Then came the grassroots response. Activists shared the clip as proof that integrity could survive the noise of modern politics. Teachers posted it in classrooms as an example of composure under pressure. Parents messaged their children, "This is how you win without yelling." It wasn't just validation for Crockett, it was representation. For communities long dismissed, for voices often talked over, her calm command became a mirror of resilience. She hadn't just defended herself. She had stood as a reminder that dignity is not weakness. Conway, meanwhile, was uncharacteristically quiet. No instant spin on cable networks, no triumphant morning after interviews. For once, her silence said more than her words could. And the absence of her usual post-debate media blitz only amplified Crockett's triumph. The ripple effects deepened. Editorial boards debated whether this was a turning point in political discourse. Opinion leaders called it a model for dismantling manipulation without sinking into its tactics. On college campuses, student groups replayed the clip in auditoriums, cheering like it was a championship game. Even rival politicians, some who rarely agreed on anything, acknowledged the weight of the moment. One senator tweeted, "We may disagree on policy, but Crockett's poise last night deserves respect. That's leadership." The cross-partisan acknowledgement stunned many. It was proof the exchange had transcended politics. It had touched something universal. And yet, beneath the celebration, there was a deeper undercurrent. The debate clip wasn't just viral entertainment. It wasn't just a meme or a trend. It carried within it a question: who truly commands truth in America's debates? Was it the spin doctors with rehearsed lines, or those who could stand unflinching and let truth speak for itself? As the sun rose the next morning, millions had already seen the exchange. Cable news played the clip on repeat, social media timelines overflowed. Coffee shops, office hallways, college dorms all buzzed with the same line. Did you see Crockett shut down Conway? The moment had become more than a headline. It was validation, inspiration, and perhaps the start of a new way of measuring strength, and the narrator's voice framed the cliffhanger with weight. But this viral moment was more than entertainment. It reshaped how power is seen in America. As the roar of the viral moment began to settle, what remained was more powerful than the spectacle itself. The lesson. Jasmine Crockett hadn't just won an exchange, she had reframed the very meaning of power, in a world addicted to noise. Crockett's calm was a revelation. While Kellyanne Conway had wielded words like blade sharp, rapid, meant to wound, Crockett had shown that true strength wasn't in the volume or speed of delivery. It was in the rootedness of truth, carried with dignity. Her power came not from clever spin, but from lived experience. From battles fought far from the TV cameras, she reminded the audience, implicitly, that education isn't confined to Ivy-covered halls or framed diplomas. It's in the lessons learned when the odds are against you. It's in the quiet determination of a working-class daughter from Texas who clawed her way into the halls of Congress. It's in the wisdom born of injustice, the resilience shaped by struggle, the empathy forged by seeing communities ignored and dismissed. Crockett's degree wasn't just academic, it was human. That made her truth untouchable. The beauty of her response was that it lifted the moment beyond petty sparring. She didn't just defeat Conway. Everyone watching that arrogance and manipulation can only dominate when truth falls silent. Crockett refused silence. She spoke with a measured cadence that made every word heavier than 1,000 sound bites. The emotional crescendo of the night was captured in one simple realization: respect is not granted by headlines, cable news appearances, or fleeting fame. Respect is earned by standing in truth so firmly that arrogance collapses under its own weight. Why? That was the real story. The real victory, not Crockett over Conway, but dignity over deceit. And this lesson rippled far beyond politics. It was about classrooms where students are told they'll never succeed, about immigrants told their accents disqualify them, about workers dismissed because their hands carry calluses instead of credentials. Crockett's win told all of them, your truth matters, your story has weight. And when spoken with dignity, it can silence even the most polished spin. The debate may have been just one night, one stage, one exchange, but its echoes carried something timeless. Crockett proved that America doesn't belong to those who shout the loudest. It belongs to those who speak the truest. And with that, the narrator closed on a cliffhanger that felt like a warning as much as a promise. And once again, history proved. The loudest voice doesn't win. The truest one does. From the very first smirk, Kellyanne Conway believed the night would go her way. She leaned on her old playbooks, sarcasm, interruptions, rapid-fire talking points. But across from her sat Jasmine Crockett, composed, unbothered, and quietly armed. With something Conway could never spin, lived truth. What followed became the arc of the night. Conway's arrogance set the stage. Crockett's composure held it steady. And then came the legendary flip the moment when Crockett's calm precision dismantled Conway's bravado and turned the room in her favor. By the time silence fell, Conway wasn't the one commanding the stage anymore. Crockett was. That exchange didn't just trend, it validated something bigger. It told millions watching that dignity isn't weakness, that calm isn't surrender, and that truth spoken with clarity can turn arrogance inside out. Kellyanne had tried to corner Crockett, but Crockett flipped the stage and the narrative in an instant. And that's why this moment matters. Because it wasn't just about one debate or one viral clip. It was about showing who truly holds power, when spin collides with substance. So here's the call. If you believe dignity should always triumph over arrogance, don't just watch, share this moment. Be part of amplifying stories that remind America what real leadership looks like. And subscribe to this channel where we cut through the noise and bring you the confrontations, the turning points, and the voices that rise above the spin. Because, in the end, truth doesn't shout, it resonates. When it resonates, it reshapes the stage for all of us.